We often talk about how humans impact the earth, how we build cities, pollute the air, and change the land. But for almost all of our history, this relationship has been a two-way street, and mostly, Earth has been in the driver's seat. The planet itself, its geology, its weather, its resources, has always shaped how humans live, where we build, and what we can or can't do. Today, we're flipping the script to see how Earth systems have influenced our activity. Our main goal, based on this Common Core standard, is to learn how to build a strong argument. We need to be able to use real-world evidence to prove a connection. Specifically, how do three big factors, the availability of natural resources, the threat of natural hazards, and changes in climate, influence what people do? It's not just do they. Of course they do. We want to know how. We're looking for the cause and effect relationship between the planet and the people who live on it. So let's start with part 1, natural resources. These are just all the things we get from Earth that we use. Some are renewable, meaning they won't run out if we manage them well, like solar energy, wind, or water. Others are non-renewable, meaning once we use them, they're gone. Think oil, gas, and coal. The location of these resources is not random. And for all of human history, the simple question of where is the water or where is the fuel has been the single most important factor in deciding where to build a life. Think about water. You can't have a civilization or even a small town without a reliable source of fresh water. It's not an accident that the very first great human civilizations, ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, all exploded to life on the banks of major rivers. Even today, look at a map of the world's biggest cities. Almost every single one is built on a coast, a major lake, or a river. In contrast, look at the world's great deserts. Like the Sahara, almost no one lives there. The availability of water is the first and most important rule of human settlement. After water, you need food, and to grow food, you need fertile soil. Just like with water, the location of this resource dictates human activity. Large, flat regions with deep, nutrient-rich soil, like the Great Plains of the United States or the plains in Ukraine, become the breadbaskets of the world. If a region has very rocky, thin soil, like in parts of New England or Norway, people have to adapt. They can't rely on large-scale farming, so their economies historically turn to other things, like fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. The soil itself shapes the economy. This is just as true for energy and minerals. Think about the California gold rush in 1849. The discovery of a single resource, gold, caused hundreds of thousands of people to migrate across the continent, building new towns and states almost overnight. You can see this pattern everywhere. The Industrial Revolution was powered by coal, so cities grew up next to the coal fields in Appalachia and England. The modern world runs on oil, which has completely reshaped the economies and global influence of places like Texas and the Middle East. We follow the resources. Now for part 2, natural hazards. These are natural Earth processes, like earthquakes or hurricanes, that are dangerous to us. It's important to remember that these aren't caused by humans, even if our actions can sometimes make them worse. We can group these hazards into 2 big categories. Tectonic hazards, which come from the Earth's crust. Think earthquakes and volcanoes. And weather-related hazards, which come from the atmosphere, like tornadoes, floods, and hurricanes. These hazards force humans to adapt or to leave. Let's look at earthquakes. A map of major earthquakes lines up perfectly with a map of tectonic plate boundaries. The Ring of Fire around the Pacific Ocean is a hotbed for this. So, if you live in Tokyo or Los Angeles or Chile, you know that earthquakes are a fact of life. How does that influence activity? It forces a response. Humans in these areas have developed some of the most advanced engineering in the world. They design skyscrapers that can sway, bridges that can flex, and enforce strict building codes that other places don't need. The hazard directly influences their science, laws, and architecture. Volcanoes are another interesting case. You'd think the obvious human response would be, don't live near a volcano. And for active ones, that's true. Pompeii is a famous lesson. But volcanoes also have a huge benefit. The ash they spew out over thousands of years creates some of the most incredibly fertile farmland on the planet. So you see a strange pattern. People do live near dormant volcanoes in places like Indonesia or Italy to take advantage of the rich soil. They are making a calculated trade-off, balancing the resource, soil, against the hazard, eruption. Iceland even harnesses volcanic heat for geothermal energy. For weather hazards, think about hurricanes. They only form over warm ocean water, which means if you live on a coast in the hurricane alley of the Atlantic or Gulf of Mexico, you must plan for them. This hazard has completely shaped coastal architecture. People build their homes up on tall stilts to let floodwater pass underneath. They install storm shutters and build seawalls. Cities have to create and practice detailed evacuation routes. The threat of the storm influences everything from how a house is built to how a city government is run. Flooding is probably the most common natural hazard. Rivers naturally overflow their banks and deposit sediment on the flat land next to them, called a floodplain. This is a classic risk versus reward scenario. The risk is that your farm or home will be flooded. But the reward is that the floodplain has the best soil for farming. For thousands of years, humans have made the choice to farm on floodplains. This has influenced us to build massive engineering projects, like dams and levees, to control the river and manage the risk. Finally, let's look at part 3, climate. It's really important to know the difference between climate and weather. Weather is what's happening right now. It's raining, it's sunny, it's cold. Climate is the long-term average of weather in a region. Think Seattle is a rainy place, or Arizona is a dry place. Of all 3 factors we're discussing, climate is the most powerful, foundational influence on human civilization. It dictates on a global scale what is possible. Look at a map of where people live on Earth. You'll see it's not random. The vast majority of the human population is clustered in temperate climates, places that aren't too hot, too cold, or too dry. Almost no one lives in the extreme polar regions or the great deserts. Why? It's too cold to farm, or there's no water. Climate sets the boundaries for agriculture. You can grow corn in Iowa, but not in Antarctica. You can grow bananas in the tropics, but not in Siberia. Climate dictates our food, and our food dictates where we can live. Climate doesn't just influence where we live, it influences our culture. Think about traditional architecture. In places with heavy snow, like Switzerland or Norway, you see houses with very steep, sloped roofs so the snow will slide off. In hot, dry climates, like in North Africa, you see homes with thick, sun-baked walls, small windows, and open-air courtyards to stay cool. Even our economies are shaped by it. You don't build a ski resort in Florida, and you don't build a beach resort in Alaska. Climate determines the personality of a region. But now there's a new factor in this old story: climate change. The long-term averages are shifting. The planet is getting warmer, and this is already influencing human activity in massive ways. What does this look like? Sea levels are rising, which is a direct threat to the millions of people living in coastal cities like Miami, New York, and Amsterdam. Droughts are becoming more intense in places like the American Southwest, putting huge pressure on farmers and water supplies. The Arctic is melting, which is bad for polar bears, but is also opening up new, shorter shipping routes for a globalized economy. This new, rapid change is forcing humanity to respond in two main ways. The first is mitigation, which means trying to stop the change by reducing our carbon emissions, like building wind turbines and solar panels. The second is adaptation, which means accepting the changes are happening and learning to live with them. This is where you see cities like Venice and New York building massive seawalls and floodgates. This climate shift is now a dominant influence on 21st century engineering, politics, and economics. The most important thing to understand is that these three factors, resources, hazards, and climate, are all deeply interconnected. They don't exist in separate boxes. For example, a change in climate can lead to a worse drought. That drought directly reduces the availability of a resource, water. That lack of water can then make a natural hazard, wildfires, much more frequent and dangerous. It's a chain reaction. You can't understand one without seeing how it connects to the others. So when your teacher or this standard asks you to construct an argument, what does that mean? It means using a model that scientists and debaters use all the time: claim, evidence, reasoning, or CER. Your claim is your answer to the question, like the location of New Orleans was determined by the Mississippi River. Your evidence is the data you use to back it up, like New Orleans is a major port, and maps show it's located at the river's mouth. Your reasoning is the so what, the connection. Therefore, humans settled there despite the risks to control the resource of river trade. Let's use that CER model on New Orleans right now. It's a perfect case study. What's the resource? The Mississippi River. It's one of the world's most valuable trade routes. That's the evidence for why people built a city there. What's the hazard? Hurricanes and flooding. The city is literally below sea level. And now, climate change is making those storms stronger and raising the sea level. How did humans respond? We were influenced to build massive levees and pump systems. This is a city that exists in a constant battle between a valuable resource and a terrible hazard. So let's sum it all up. Human history and Earth history are the same story. You can't separate them. Our modern world, where we live, how we build, what we eat, and what we value, has been and continues to be shaped by these three powerful factors: the availability of resources like water and fuel, the location and risk of natural hazards like earthquakes and storms, and the overarching reality of our planet's climate. Our civilization is the product of how we've adapted to these three planetary forces.